talk about school.
All
Because
right.
this takes us into a whole other category, and that is we know that the school years, that's the impressionable years when people are trying to find themselves and they're involved in cliques and so forth and so on. And you mentioned this early, that's when bullying comes into play, because that conflict manifests itself in that way because this clique is against this other person and they just tend to bully for no reason. Your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, I don't think anybody does anything for no reason. I think everything's prompted by something. And so when you look at someone who's bullying, again, you go back to those feelings of feeling insecure, wanting to have a voice, wanting to be popular. And when you bully, then a lot of people don't want to be bullied. So what happens? You're able to gather some people in support of what your agenda is, which is to be powerful and popular.
Get this. I want to put up some statistics that I found quite alarming in a lot of ways and eye-opening in others. Some statistics about bullying, some things that you may not know concerning bullying, and we'll put this up right now. According to bullyingstatistics.com, did you know 77% of students said that they had been bullied? 77%. Recent bullying statistics admit that half of all bullying incidents go unreported. People aren't even talking about this. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. 23% of elementary students reported being bullied 1 to 3 times just in the last month. And this is a big number. 100,000 students are packing heat, carrying a gun to school because of the bullying that they're either inflicting on someone or that they're afraid is going to be inflicted on them. 14% of those who were bullied say that they experienced severe reactions to their abuse.
Some of the things that a lot of people deal with is depression. And what does depression lead to? Suicidal attempts, it leads to low self-esteem, it leads to a whole lot of other issues. And certainly, yes, I was the one who was bullied, teased, taunted, scared to go to school, hated school, didn't, you know, just shut down. And I actually took control of my life at 13, but you know, it's crazy.
How did you do that? What did you do?
You know,
here you are getting bullied one day and then a light went off? What happened?
You know what? One of the statistics you put out there was the fact that people, a lot of these incidences go unreported. And for me, I was scared to say anything to anybody, so I had to find something. And I picked up a book called See You at the Top by Zig Ziglar. And it talked about confidence. It talked about putting your shoulders back. It talked about pretending like you were happy even if you weren't, because eventually you convince yourself that you were happy. And so that's how it started for me. But it didn't end there, because I went to a different school. I was transferred. We moved to a new neighborhood. I had decided that I wasn't going to be bullied this time. And of course, the bully and their entourage, they came in, and we were in gym class. And they all would come by, hit me in the head and run, hit me in the head and run, hit me in the head and run. Art, I looked for the weakest link. And when I found her, and this isn't advice that I'm giving, I'm just saying how it happened for me. Looked for her, found her, got up, ran after her, jumped on her, started fighting. Before I knew it, I was in the principal's office, and the question was, why is the good girl fighting? Well, the good girl was tired of being bullied. The
good girl was fighting back, is what she was doing.
Absolutely, and that's not exactly what I advise people to do. I advise them to go and try and get help, and to know that
you know, and that's a fine line, and you know, a lot of people are right there with you in agreeing with that, because they say at some point you've got to make a stand for yourself. You know, stand for something or you'll fall for anything or anybody. And at some point you have to make a stand rather than being a crybaby or doing that. And although we're not advocating violence here, but in some kind of way you have to make a stand. But the key here is that you decided that enough was enough and that you were going to do something.
Absolutely. And most bullies get to that point. Enough is enough. Either they become a bully themselves or they become violent. It leads to crime, depression, suicide. So yes, a decision is made, some type of decision. The question is what decision is made.
And that carries out far beyond just a person being bullied. It affects the whole family. I mean, look at the headlines we've seen where people have been bullied and these cases have been in the news. This is an ongoing dilemma that is certainly not new, and it does impact the entire family.
It sure does. And you know, Art, I think it's really important to know that this is the result of something else, and it's really some core issues that are going on in the home, outside the home, in the schools, in our communities, in our churches. I mean, you name it, there are some real core issues that we have to look at, and it really starts with the individual and how we look at development, personal development, interpersonal and intrapersonal relationships.
In terms of getting help, I mean, is it the kind of thing where you have to come to terms with it yourself and you say, I got to talk to someone about this, or I've got to make some changes in my life to try and get along better with others, whether it's bullying or not, but just simply to get along better?
Absolutely, but I think there needs to be some sensitivity too. When people are 10, 11, 12 years old, it's hard to rationalize things out like that. As an adult, we should be able to do it, but we're not always capable of doing it. So how can we expect a 13-year-old to do it or a 10-year-old? I think there needs to be some consciousness around adult conversation about these young people being bullied. 100,000.
Yeah.
77. That's outrageous.
Carrying guns. My goodness, 100,000 kids carrying guns to school. Obviously, this is not something that the school officials know about, but just the thought of in all of those little book bags that they're carrying on their backs, that rather than having a chemistry book in there, they've got a Smith & Wesson in there.
Absolutely. They're sick and tired of being sick and tired. I mean, I wouldn't carry a gun, and fortunately, I came from a different type of home. But however, there are people who come from violence. They've seen violence. It's a part of what they've always seen, and so they resort to that. And people who haven't. So there needs to be, some dialogue, some serious conversation about how are we going to eradicate this huge, huge issue, not only on the playground, but also in the workplace.